Hi there, my name is Sarah Horne and I work for the Office of Career Development and Community Engagement. And today we're going to be talking about ways and strategies to discuss your strengths and skill sets in an interview setting. So let's get started. So there are a few reasons why it's really important to excel at discussing your strengths in an interview. And to me, one of the most obvious reasons for that is that interviews are a competitive setting. So every interview that you go into, I would bet, has other candidates that are also interviewing for that very same job. So I think a lot of people tend to forget that interviews really are a competitive setting, and they just view an interview as one last thing to have to get through before they get the job. But that's really not a good strategy when approaching an interview. So don't forget that interviews are competitive, and also that self-confidence is really important to employers. Employers want to believe that you believe in yourself. So demonstrating self-confidence by being able to talk about your strengths with confidence is really valuable in that competitive interview setting. And then lastly, the only way to get the job, or the only way to prove to employers that you can do the job well, is to demonstrate those skill sets and strengths that are pertinent to the job. Because the employer, if you are not successful in communicating what strengths and skill sets you have that would be beneficial to the job, the employer is probably not going to be inclined to hire you. So it's really important for a variety of reasons. But in short, you're probably not going to be able to get the job if you can't clearly communicate why you would be good at the job. So there are, in interviews, several opportunities for you to talk about your strengths, and one of them is just throughout the duration of the interview, they're going to be asking you questions about your past experience. They're going to ask you questions about your behavior in certain situations, and even though those questions aren't necessarily asking you directly about your skill sets and your strengths, it's still a good idea to try to talk about the qualities that you demonstrate in those answers and how they relate to the job and how they would benefit you if chosen for the job. There are also some specific questions that employers might ask you directly about your strengths, and a few examples of those are, what are your strengths, or what is your greatest strength? Why should we hire you? Or why are you the best person for the job? And I would suspect that you would be asked at least one of those questions that I just named off in any interview, so it's important to be able to confidently approach that question by discussing your strengths and skill sets. So a really common question that I hear from students and alumni that I work with is, how do I talk about my strengths and accomplishments without coming off as if I'm bragging? And this is a really challenging line to draw, because you are, sort of bragging, but you're not bragging in a self-righteous or an overly confident way. You're bragging in just the sense that you're talking about some of the things that you're good at. And that's really the purpose of an interview, is to give you an opportunity to talk about your strengths and assets in such a way that they align to the job you're applying for. So a few strategies that I have to change the tone or the way that you phrase these answers are on the screen. So one of my recommendations is to use facts or factual evidence. So relying on any type of fact is really going to help show that you have worked hard to develop this skill set, and you have some type of external way of proving that you have this skill set. So what I mean by that is to mention any certification that you might have in a skill set, or maybe you took a class and you got an A in that class, and having gotten an A demonstrates that you've done really well with that. Or maybe you have 5 years of experience doing a certain thing. So all of those options that I gave you is demonstrating, every one of those options demonstrates that you have that skill set based on a fact. So it's not you just saying from your opinion you're good at this thing. It's saying based on my experience or my certification or my performance in this class, this leads me to believe that I have a strong skill set in this area, or something like that. The next idea that I have for talking about your strengths without coming off as being braggadocious is to relate your strengths back to the job requirement. So I think as long as you're saying, I know that this company needs a person with this skill set, and I can meet that need because of my experience or my certification or, my performance in a certain class, that really helps again, not sound like you're bragging, because you're talking in terms of what the employer needs and less about your own opinion of your strengths. I think people come off as sounding braggy when they're only relying on their own opinion of their strengths. And then lastly, you can rely on talking about your effort. So maybe you've worked really hard to hone this skill set, or you pulled all-nighters studying for tests so that you could really excel well and prove that you have this skill. Talking about your effort is another way that helps you not rely on your own opinion. So a few examples of this. First, you could say, maybe I earned a certificate in C programming. That would be a fact that you could rely on. Another example, which is kind of nesting or talking about your experience in terms of the needs of the employer, is to mention those needs verbally and say, I saw that the job requirement includes public speaking skills, or this job description requires somebody with strong public speaking skills, and I've become comfortable giving public presentations as a part of my leadership position in my student organization. So that's kind of referring back to the job description and then talking about how your strengths or skills relate to that or might meet that need. And then lastly, you can rely on your effort by saying something like, I've worked hard to master the concepts of sales. Sorry, I know that my video feed right here is you can't see this word, but it says, I've worked hard to master the concepts of sales through my school and internship experience. So that's relying on your effort. So just to recap, it's really important to be able to discuss your strengths in an interview, because it's the only way an employer is going to be able to trust that you can perform the job requirements. And to do this, you can use facts by talking about certifications, accolades, grades that you might have gotten in a certain skill set. You can also do this by relating your strength or skill set back to the requirements of the job. And you can also rely on talking about your effort and how hard you work to acquire this skill set. I hope this was helpful. It's really important to be able to talk about your strengths, and it's not that difficult to talk about your strengths in such a way that it doesn't sound like you're bragging about yourself. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can email me, and I would be more than happy to assist. Thank you very much and have a good day.